In 1993, Marvel Comics was the most valuable comic book publisher in the world. Collectors were paying thousands of dollars for back issues. New comics sold millions of copies. The company was printing money. But the money was fake. The comic book boom of the early 1990s wasn't driven by readers. It was driven by speculators. People who bought 5 copies of every issue hoping they'd be worth something someday. And in 1994, the bubble burst. Suddenly, nobody was buying. Marvel's revenue collapsed. They had spent millions expanding, buying distribution companies, and signing talent to expensive deals. When the money stopped coming in, they were trapped. By 1995, Marvel was losing money for the first time in years. Ronald Perelman, the billionaire who owned the company, had loaded it with debt to pay for acquisitions. The debt was $600 million. And the company that once sold 50 million comics a year could barely stay afloat. On December 27, 1996, Marvel Entertainment Group filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The company that had created Spider-Man, the X-Men, and the Fantastic Four was broke. 275 employees had already been laid off. The stock was delisted from the New York Stock Exchange. What followed was a year-long legal war. Ronald Perelman wanted to merge Marvel with Toy Biz to keep control. Carl Icahn, the famous corporate raider, bought Marvel's debt and tried to take over. The banks fought both of them. It was a 3-way slugfest over a dying company. When the dust settled in 1998, a new company called Marvel Enterprises emerged. The banks had won. The old leadership was gone. And Marvel had one thing left: a library of characters that had been created over 60 years. The problem was, they'd already sold many of the most valuable ones. Before the bankruptcy, Marvel had sold the film rights to its best characters just to keep the lights on. In 1993, 20th Century Fox bought the film rights to the X-Men for a fraction of what they were worth. In 1999, Sony bought Spider-Man for $7 million, a price that would later look like the cheapest deal in Hollywood history. Fox made X-Men in 2000. Sony made Spider-Man in 2002. Both were massive hits. Spider-Man alone made over $800 million at the box office. But Marvel didn't see most of that money. They got a tiny licensing fee, maybe 5% of the gross. The studios made billions. Marvel got scraps. By 2004, nearly every major Marvel character was locked up in long-term deals with other studios. Spider-Man was at Sony. The X-Men and Fantastic Four were at Fox. The Hulk was at Universal. Blade was at New Line. Daredevil was at Fox. What was left in Marvel's vault was considered the B-list. Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, Black Panther, Ant-Man. Characters that had never been in a movie. Characters that nobody believed could carry a film. In 2004, a Hollywood executive named David Maisel walked into Marvel's offices with an idea that sounded insane. He proposed that Marvel should stop licensing its characters to other studios and start making its own movies. Not just one movie, a whole series of interconnected films, each one building toward a team-up event. Like the comics, but on screen. The problem was money. Marvel didn't have any. Making a single movie costs $100 million or more. Marvel was a licensing company with modest revenue and a long history of near-death experiences. No bank would lend them money to make a movie. Except one. Merrill Lynch agreed to a deal. They would lend Marvel $525 million, enough to make 10 movies over 8 years. But there was a catch. The loan was secured by film rights to the characters themselves. If the movies failed, Merrill Lynch would own Iron Man. They would own Thor. They would own Captain America. Everything Marvel had left. The characters used as collateral: Ant-Man, the Avengers, Black Panther, Captain America, Cloak and Dagger, Doctor Strange, Hawkeye, Nick Fury, Power Pack, Shang-Chi. These were the rejects, the characters the other studios didn't want, and they were all Marvel had left to bet. The first movie in Marvel's plan was Iron Man. Not Spider-Man, not the X-Men. Iron Man, a second-tier character who even comic book fans considered a minor hero. The lead actor was Robert Downey Jr., At the time, Downey was considered a washed-up liability. He had been in prison, he had been fired from every major project. No insurance company would bond him. Jon Favreau, the director, had to fight to get him cast. The studio didn't want him. The budget was $150 million, nearly a third of the entire Merrill Lynch loan, tied up in a single movie starring an actor nobody trusted. Inside Marvel, people were terrified. If Iron Man failed, the whole plan collapsed. There was no backup, there was no second chance. The shoot was chaotic. Much of the dialogue was improvised. The script wasn't finished. Downey and Favreau rewrote scenes the night before shooting. The special effects team had to invent technology that had never been built before. The suit went from a practical prop to full CGI in the middle of production. It was controlled chaos. But somehow, it worked. Iron Man opened on May 2nd, 2008. The critics loved it. Audiences loved it. It made $585 million worldwide, nearly 4 times its budget. Robert Downey Jr. became a star again. Marvel had pulled off the impossible. They had made a hit movie about a B-list character with a broken actor and a script that was written as they went along. But the most important moment came after the credits. In the final seconds of the film, Samuel L. Jackson walked into Tony Stark's living room as Nick Fury. He said 5 words, "I'm here to talk to you about the Avengers initiative." Nobody had ever done that before. A post-credits scene that teased a future movie. But even more, a scene that connected this movie to others that hadn't been made yet. It was a promise that Marvel was building something bigger than any single film. The audience went crazy. That post-credit scene was the seed of the $22 billion franchise that was about to follow. It cost almost nothing to film. It changed the movie business forever. Over the next 4 years, Marvel released one movie after another. The Incredible Hulk in 2008, Edward Norton as Bruce Banner, more action than drama, solid but not spectacular. Iron Man 2 in 2010, bigger, flashier, but critics said it was trying to do too much. Thor in 2011, a Shakespearean space opera about a Norse god, directed by Kenneth Branagh, nobody knew if it would work. Captain America in 2011, a World War II period piece about a scrawny kid who becomes a super soldier, directed by Joe Johnston. Each movie had Easter eggs, hidden references. Characters who appeared in one film would show up in another. Samuel L. Jackson appeared across multiple films as Nick Fury. Clark Gregg appeared as Agent Coulson. The pieces were being assembled on screen, one film at a time. The strategy was expensive and risky. Marvel was spending hundreds of millions of dollars on movies that could each crash independently. But the bet was that the whole would be greater than the sum of the parts. If every movie was connected, every movie was promotion for the next. Iron Man 2 marketed Thor. Thor marketed Captain America. And all of them marketed the movie that was coming next. In May 2012, The Avengers opened in theaters. It brought together Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, Hulk, Black Widow, and Hawkeye in a single film. It was the most ambitious crossover in movie history. 6 movies had led to this moment. $1 billion had been invested. The entire studio's future rested on one film. The Avengers made $1, $5 billion worldwide. It was the 3rd highest grossing film in history. It was a triumph that had no precedent. No studio had ever built a franchise like this. No studio had ever connected movies this way. Marvel had not only survived, they had created a new model for Hollywood. The strategy that seemed insane in 2005 was now the most studied business case in Hollywood. Marvel had taken characters that other studios considered worthless and built them into the most valuable film franchise in history. They had turned their disadvantage, having only the B-list characters, into their greatest strength, because nobody had any expectations for Iron Man. There was no famous movie version to live up to. They could make him anything they wanted. In 2009, before The Avengers was even released, Disney saw what Marvel was building. They bought Marvel Entertainment for $4 billion. At the time, critics said Disney overpaid. Marvel was a comic book company with only one movie franchise. By 2019, that $4 billion acquisition was looking like the best deal Disney ever made. The Marvel Cinematic Universe had released 22 films that earned over $22 billion worldwide. Avengers Endgame alone made $8 billion. The characters that nobody wanted, Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, Black Panther, were now the most recognizable faces in pop culture. Marvel didn't just survive. It became the dominant force in entertainment. A company that had filed for bankruptcy in 1996, that had sold its most famous characters for scraps, ended up owning the biggest franchise on Earth. The mastermind behind all of this was Kevin Feige. He had been a production assistant on the original X-Men films. He rose through Marvel Studios and became president in 2008. His philosophy was simple. The characters come first, not the stars. Every movie serves the larger story. No director is bigger than the universe. Feige built a system that no other studio has been able to replicate. A central brain that oversees every movie, every TV show, every script. A plan that stretches 5 years into the future. A process where individual films can fail without damaging the whole, because the next film is already connected, already anticipated, already promoted by everything that came before. This was the insight that made it work. Marvel didn't just make good movies. They made a system where every movie was a chapter in a larger book, where fans had to watch every single one, not because any single film was unmissable, but because missing one meant missing a piece of the puzzle. It turned occasional moviegoers into loyal subscribers. It was the closest thing to a comic book on screen, a shared universe where every story mattered. What Marvel did is the ultimate case study in resourcefulness. They didn't have the best characters. They had the leftovers. They didn't have the most money. They mortgaged what they had just to start. They didn't have the most trusted talent. Their lead actor was considered uninsurable. They had nothing that would make a traditional business plan work. But they had something better. They had a vision of something that had never been done before. And they refused to compromise on that vision. When they couldn't license their characters, they made their own movies. When they couldn't afford the A-list, they built stars from the B-list. When they couldn't copy Hollywood's model, they invented their own. The lesson is not about superheroes. It is about what happens when you take what everyone else considers worthless and build something new with it. The characters that Sony and Fox passed on, Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, became more valuable than the ones they bought, because the value was never in the characters. The value was in the system Marvel built around them. Every company has something in its vault that it considers worthless. Every business has the piece that doesn't fit. The question is whether you have the courage to build around it anyway. Marvel did. And they changed the movie business forever.